So with that, I introduce Assistant Professor of English, Dr. Jeff Bilbro.
Yeah, thanks all for coming out. I would have been focused out, so I know what to come. And I'm glad also that I'm talking about monasteries before Brent does, because I would want to try to follow up his monastic. I don't know what he's talking about, but I'm sure it's going to be better. So you should go there. So I'm not going to be speaking to you today as a specialist in any sort of sense. Not as a literature specialist, not as a professional economist, not as a business expert, but simply as a human. Okay? So in talking about work today, I'm going to try to take an expansive view, or a human view. And while I won't be able to include everything, thank goodness, right? You know, that will be my standard. My goal will be to leave nothing out. Wendell Berry has a poem. No, I was going to quote Wendell Berry. So, got that out of the way. Third sentence, Robbie. Wendell Berry has a poem about work that expresses this desire with an analogy that's rather apt for Michigan this time period. And this poem is on your handout. Hopefully you have this handout. Suppose we did our work like the snow, quietly, leaving nothing out. The irony, of course, is that in order to leave nothing out, in order to include everything, we have to think on a small scale. We have to think little, Berry says in one of his essays. So if you leave here today with just one thing in your mind, let it be this paradox. To include everything in your work, you have to work on a small local scale. And this is why we all have to become honest. So you can see in hand, I'm going to try to address this question with sort of four main topics. Hopefully that helps you follow along. And in the end, I'd like to open it up and ask you about questions, ask you some questions about your ideas regarding how we might practice more local work. So as I'm talking, you may jot some ideas down about that, and then we'll have a conversation afterwards. I want to begin with a rough definition of good work, one that we can refine as we proceed. Good human work, I think, participates in God's redemptive work. And that's sort of the short version. Jamie Smith, in his talk on Monday afternoon at 2:30, for those of you who were here, talked about how God's work of creation in Genesis set the stage for human work to follow, human work to cultivate. So if God does the work of creation, the human task is to cultivate creation, to sort of unfold or unpack the latent potentialities in God's creative work. So that's what I mean when I say good human work participates in God's redemptive work. Thus, good human work is our loving, healing, and humane acting out the image of God that we bear, the image that obliges us to be God's representatives to his creation. So as Berry argues, bad work is actually blasphemous. Here's a quote from Berry. To work without pleasure or affection, to make a product that is not both useful and beautiful, is to dishonor God, nature, the thing that is made, and whomever it is made for. This is blasphemy, to make shoddy work of the work of God. That might seem like a really high standard and one that we can't live up to, but I think that it should at least guide our work. And such a high view of work does encourage us to actually consider how to fulfill the gospel's call to love God and love our neighbor. While we often give lip service to these commands, I'm not sure that we consider their full implications. For starters, loving our neighbor would mean knowing them and participating in an economy with them. And it's hard to love someone if you don't actually know them and work with them. Such work is the physical means through which we enact our love for those around us. If the way our economy functions today is often more global than local, right? We think about sort of global implications of the things that we buy and consume, and we don't often think about doing local work or participating in local economies. But this makes it really difficult to practice any sort of real love for those with whom our work participates. Now, I keep using this word economy, and it sounds like a technical, abstract word. It sounds like something that belongs to the business department. But really, economy just means household. It's the study of how we live with those with whom we share our household. And it's actually related to a bunch of other really interesting words like ecology, the household of earth, diocese, the jurisdiction of the local church. And it's the same Greek word that's used in the New Testament to talk about the household of faith, church. So economy is not just this sort of business work, right? That's all just broader implications. And yet this divorce of economy from household, this abstraction of our work from our neighbor is at the root, I think, of what makes good work so difficult for us to imagine. As college students, many of you experience the fears and worries brought on by that difficulty of imagining good work. You likely fear being forced to do bad work, which typically comes in one or two forms. These are the kind of worries I hear from my students all the time. One is that you'll be able to make a living only by doing something destructive or reductive for people made in the image of God. Right? You have to either do something mundane and boring and meaningless, sit at some office job for hours, or even worse, participate in some sort of destructive job that actually is damaging, not just useless. Yet, any job that avoids all these dangers often ends up being bad in another way. You don't get paid for it, right? You might get paid for your work. So either you can make money doing something you don't like, or you can do something you do like and not get paid for it. Right? So this catch 22. And I think you are keenly aware of this as you're thinking about getting a job in a couple of years, right? That these jobs that do exist, that you see out there, are often boring and unfulfilling and give little opportunities for the kind of legitimate work that enables ourselves and others to flourish. So part of this difficulty is simply due to the fact that we live in a fallen world. So I don't want you to think you have to strive for some ideal job. Our work is subject to frustration. We always need people to do the mundane work of weeding, taking out the trash, cleaning the toilet, and these other tasks that seem to be beneath human dignity. But the point of life isn't to escape such menial labor. It is to find the work to which we've been called, work that serves the healing of others. This work might be dirty and not very interesting. The last task that Jesus does before the going on the cross is to wash his disciples' feet. Not very exciting, the work of service. But if it's work that cares for those we love, I think it can still be rewarding and fulfilling. Jesus washed the feet of those 12 people who had been with him his whole ministry. Such work is part of our condition and it's also part of our calling. And it becomes to meaning only when we ask certain people to spend their whole lives doing this sort of repetitive, dirty, boring work, in order that other people can spend their whole lives doing fun, fulfilling work. Right? When we specialize in that. This brings me to point 2 of my outline, that the chief cause of bad work, of the bad work that fails our economy, is over-specialization. Now, before you reject this claim outright, let me say that all specialization isn't bad. Okay, so there is some good specialization. It would be pretty hypocritical of me, actually, to say that specialization is bad when I spent 5 years of my life to earn a PhD, right, the most specialized degree ever. My dissertation is on the Christian roots of ecological ethics in American life. There are a lot of people who know way more than I do about Christianity, a lot of people who know way more than I do about environmental ethics, and a lot of people who know way more than I do about American literature. But I think if I just kept adding modifiers, I could finally get to something narrow and focused enough that I can know, a lot about it. So you just keep narrowing and narrowing and narrowing, you can find something interesting, something you can specialize in. That's what all PhD students have to do. We have to find some field narrow enough that we can make an original contribution to it. This move to specialize in order to maximize originality is what I think contributes to the unique structures of our economic systems. The problem is that the more qualifiers you add, the more narrow you have to get in order to be scarce and thus able to command a high salary. So if I can do something better than anyone else, even if it's a very narrow particular something, then I'm likely to be able to charge a lot of money for my services. Unfortunately, I haven't found anybody who's paying a lot of money to talk about Christian roots, ecological ethics, and American life, but I'm sorry for that. But thanks to the way supply and demand operates, we pay super specialists relatively more. We pay less for those jobs, which may be more important, but aren't as specialized. This is why, I do have these baseballs here. I can use my baseball prop. This is not my baseball, but if you're on the baseball team, very nice to meet you. This is why we pay athletes who are consummate specialists a lot of money. You can throw this ball 100 miles an hour, and accurately, you can make a lot of money. Right? Doesn't matter what else you do, as long as you can do this well. You pay a lot of, or you put a ball through a metal hoop. But we pay a lot less for work that is arguably more important to the well-being of our society, like growing food, collecting garbage, maintaining roads, or teaching children. Because these kinds of work, we think, can be performed by more people and don't require such a specialty. So specialization puts you as a worker on the right side of the supply and demand curve. Right? The problem with specialization is that as the pressure increases to become super specialized, people push themselves to be deformed and will do increasingly damaging work in order to command that higher salary. So we have NFL linemen who have to be almost obese in order to perform their jobs. Or we have the rampant problem of steroids in athletics, where people choose short-term gains and strength over long-term consequences. Even people who want to do good work find themselves thwarted. And I'm not saying that athletes don't want to do good work. I'm just saying that if you want to succeed in professional sports, it often requires these sorts of sacrifices. But even people who want to succeed in other areas often find themselves frustrated. We have farmers who can't make a living growing the healthy food they may want to, and instead must maximize the yearly yield of whatever monoculture currently offers the best profit margin, regardless of its effects on the land, on their community, or on their own lives. We have doctors who go into medicine hoping to heal people and end up treating one specific disease and filling out tons of paperwork rather than actually working towards their patient's health. We have politicians who go into politics to seek the common good and find they have to spend all their life raising money and navigating power plays rather than actually serving their communities, which they want to do. Or we have university professors who know just one narrow field and can't teach an introductory course or practice wisdom because they're so focused on their research specialty. I think Spring Arbor we're blessed to have more generalists, but if you go to a D1 school, it's much more like this. So this frustration in our work is not only part of the curse, part of the reality that our labor is doomed to frustration, but it's also a result of a fragmented, over-specialized, diseased economy. Thus, we should not simply accept this economy as an inevitable tragedy and capitulate. Rather, we should seek to make as many jobs as possible healthy or able to serve God's kingdom. So, that's cheerful. What can we do? I like to think about modern, up-to-date solutions. So I'm inspired by this guy who lived 1,500 years ago and was faced with a corrupt economy and a failing empire and decided to form small, intentional communities of Christians which could be self-supporting while doing the most important of all Christian work, prayer. Benedict began one of the most important church movements when he established his monasteries. And while you might not all want to join a monastery right now, monasteries may be able to teach us much about how we can imagine good, redeeming work in our own lives. Benedict believes that faced with economic and political fragmentation, at least some Christians needed to form healthy communities to model and preserve a lifestyle that witnessed to God's kingdom. These communities would not only pray and worship, but they would also be self-sufficient. So in his rule for practicing monks, he explained how they all need to work, growing food, cooking, cleaning, and praying, so they don't live specialized lives. Indeed, the Benedictine motto, ora et labora, prayer and work, indicates the unity Benedict saw between these two practices. The integration of work and prayer improves both. Prayer makes their physical labor more reverent and careful, and their work offers them opportunities to act in accordance with their prayers. So Benedict lays out a very detailed schedule that balances work and prayer, listing specific times brothers should pray the work of liturgy, and also specific hours they should work in the field. They have a very strict regimen that divides. This is what he says. If they have to work even more, sometimes, during the times of the harvest or whatever, they may have to work more outside its hours. And apparently they were very concerned about taking hours of prayer. So Benedict says this, if you have to work more, you should not be despondent, because it is when you live by the work of your hands, like our fathers and the apostles, that you are truly monks. This Benedictine emphasis on moderation and balance and working with your hands counteracts the tendency towards specialization. Benedict does recognize, however, that skilled workers, artists, and craftsmen can make a unique and valuable contribution to the monastery. He specifies, though, that these craftsmen must always serve their community. Whenever a particular craftsman is tempted to think that his specialized work makes him more valuable or important in the monastery, he must be removed from his vocation back. This is what Benedict says. If there are any craftsmen in the monastery, let them practice their crafts with complete humility, as long as the abbot gives his permission. But if one of them becomes arrogant because he is skilled in his craft, believing that he is benefiting the monastery, he should be removed from that craft and not allowed to resume it until he has shown humility and the abbot tells him he may resume it. So again, Benedict's very careful to say you can't think about your work as somehow super important to the community. We're all equal, we all do the work, and we all pray. Other aspects of the Benedictine monastery cultivate this integrated communal economy. Monastics can have no personal property. Each is required to serve their turn in the kitchen. They pray and eat together daily. And they take a vow of stability, which means they're not going to move around. This is the kind of household, I think, for the good work that Barry describes, work that honors God's work, seems more imaginable. So we'll look at least three attributes this sort of this work and unpack the kind of work that monastics can do. Three things. Work serves a common, locally understood purpose. It is communal, and it is integrated in person. So I'll take these in turn. The first, a common, locally understood purpose can make even tedious work satisfying and fulfilling. If you're weeding a flower bed in an industrial building, it's pretty tedious, so it's sort of endless, right? If you're weeding the flower bed outside your own house, you can see the results of your labor much more clearly. It's the same exact work. You're plucking weeds out of the ground, right? Precise same action, but one seems much more fulfilling and rewarding than the other. So the context matters. A classic story that's told often gets at this principle, and actually, I was kind of bummed out because Rick Ostrander, in his chapel talk, stole my story. But fortunately, he told it wrong, so I can there were once 3 stonecutters working together, okay? And a traveler comes up to these 3 stonecutters. He calls his bricklayer. They're actually stonecutters. And the first one is cutting the stone, and the traveler asks him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm cutting the stone." So, okay. He goes to the second stonecutter. He says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm doing this work. I'm cutting the stone so that I can feed my family." Oh, okay. You make money. He asks the third one, "What are you doing?" He says, I'm cutting the stone that's going to go in the east transept of that cathedral over there, because we're going to come here and worship God. So they each are working for different purposes, right? One is just focused on the task. One is trying to earn the wage, a fine task. But only the third sees how his work fits into this larger whole. So they're all doing exactly the same task, just like in pulling weeds, right? They're all doing the same thing. But only the third, I think, is doing the best work, doing the best kind of work. And this is part of the reason why liberal arts education can be so important, right? Because it teaches us it teaches us the common language and structures that all disciplines share. We sort of learn how disciplines work, how pieces fit together, and thus it's easier for us to see how our work can relate to the whole. We're not just, as Bill Gray says in an essay, lopped off branches waving around, randomly doing their own thing. But we see how it all forms a tree. So if you know that you're building a cathedral, you can take pride and joy in your work. And if you happen to discover that you're being employed to build a dungeon, you can stop working. Right? The worker who sees only his own task is a slave. That's why I call it liberal arts education. It frees you to work responsibly. In order to see the whole toward which your work contributes, however, you need more than just a liberal arts education. Sorry. You also need to work in or near your household. This enables you to imagine or to perceive the way that your work serves to help your household. If you're building something that will be used in some faraway place by people you will never meet, then it's nearly impossible to imagine or understand the purpose of your work serves. This is not only dangerous because you may be working towards something you don't want to be working for, but it is also reductive of your humanity. If we're made to do fulfilling work that participates in God's redemptive work, then we should be able to see how our work might serve His kingdom and take pleasure in that. I think that's the challenge of the global economy, being abstracted from the results of the work. That causes, I think, all kinds of problems, even though it also has fun benefits. This local human scale, though, would not only enable you to imagine the purpose your work is serving, but it also makes our work more communal and thus, I think, improves the quality of our work. So it's not only more fulfilling, but you actually work better. When we can see the results of our work on those we live with and love, when our work either serves them or harms them, and that's visible to us, we will work with greater care. Particularly when, like Benedictine monks, we don't have the option of just moving away. We just need sloppy. Right? They take this responsibility, so they can't leave. Work done within a household is responsible because it is able to respond to its effects and correct its mistakes. It's adapted to its context. It's particular in its care for both the thing it's working with and for those who use it. For instance, when my wife and I laid tile around our shower last spring, we worked carefully. For one thing, because you're working with mortars, so once it hardens, you're stuck. But for another thing, because we were well aware of who's going to be using the shower, us. So we wanted to work well, take pride in work. Unfortunately, those very notes, much modern work is done in academic or professional or industrial or electronic enclosures. He says the work is thus enclosed in order to achieve a space of separation between the workers and the effects of their work. The enclosure permits the workers to think they are working nowhere or anywhere, in their careers or specialties perhaps, or in cyberspace. So responsible work is accountable to its effects and influence is possible only if the worker knows and accepts the reality of the context of the work. Working locally on a human scale enables us to look beyond the narrow concerns of profitability and utility and ask these crucial questions that recognize the ramifications of work. So here are some 2 questions that Barry suggests we ask. What is the effect of the work upon the place, its ecosystem, its watershed, its atmosphere, its community? What is the effect of the product upon its user and upon the place where it is used? We should be thinking about the consequences of the work, right? So local work is not only more satisfying and fulfilling, but it's also more accountable and hence more likely to be done well. And then finally, the sort of monastic work is more diverse. If we're going to work within a human scale, we're going to have to do more diverse work, right? In each household and neighborhood, there are too many different tasks and too few workers to have each one done by a specialized person. Working within local economies is going to require our work to grow more complex, more diverse, but also more widely accountable to our lives. In a monastic community, each person takes on responsibility for some frustrating tasks, doing the dishes, taking out the trash, etc., taking out the trash. But each also participates in the tasks of prayer and contributes his or her unique vocation or craft to the life of the community. So you get to do some specialized work in your vocation, and you also get to take on some of the less exciting work. This integrated holistic mode of living combats over-specialization and can contribute, I think, to a more healthy life where we work with and for those we love, and where our household is strengthened by this cooperation. Now, as I said, some specialization is good, and I certainly specialize in my job in reading literature. But if all I did was read literature, I would be living a very unbalanced, unhealthy, anemic life. I'd get obese, and my wife wouldn't be very happy with me. My boss would not, right? Too bad. So just because some specialization is good, doesn't mean that more specialization is better. So I'm not saying throw out all specialization, so mean put it in context. Finally, such an integrated economy, such a sort of diverse way of working, is going to require us all to get our hands dirty. Sorry. I'm afraid college is often viewed as a ticket out of manual labor. If I go to college, then I don't have to work with my hands. But why would we want to stop working with our hands? Manual labor enables us to relate to the world in more precise, intimate ways than if we only use our intellects. For instance, when I work on my bike, when I do plumbing in my house, my sort of theoretical, abstract YouTube knowledge is quickly sharpened and corrected by the physical things I'm working with. Right? All of a sudden, pipes start leaking, and I learn a lot about how pipes fit together by my failures. It's a whole different. I have a whole different understanding of the gearbox from reading about it in literature or even biking than I do when I actually take it apart and put it together. So your knowledge becomes more precise. This is why a good teacher doesn't just give you a book about biology and say, read the test. She has you read the book, and then you work with the material, apply it to the question, do experiments on it. You have to play, you have to manipulate to work with knowledge in order to improve understanding. So the result of this more intimate knowledge is that you are able to care better for those around you. Our work becomes less sloppy and less removed. And this intimate knowledge prepares us to participate in restorative caring work that shares God's will. Okay, so maybe by this point you're convinced that a monastic community offers a better sphere of good work, and you're all ready to go join a monastery, right? I'm going to get fired. So if you're not going to join a monastery, how can this sort of pointless argument actually take root and become helpful to our life? I'm going to offer a couple of examples that I hope will get your creative juices flowing, and then, like I said, hopefully afterwards you can give me some further ideas, and we'll have a short conversation. I think our goal here should be to participate more in amateur economies, ones based on love, right? That's what amateur means, right? Love. Rather than professional economies, ones based on exchange of money. So maybe all will become monks. We all can seek to participate in healthy local economies where good work might be done. So here's a couple ideas. First, a good place to begin is to participate in your local food economy. Gardening is an easy way to work for the health of your house. You know that about gardening, right? Gardening is an easy way to work for the health of your household. And that's why we started a garden here at Spring Arbor University. So join us when the weather improves. Hopefully, working this garden can teach you how to garden well and then inspire you to continue growing your own food after you graduate. But you can't grow all your own food, right? I'm not expecting you to all become farmers, but you do need your hands dirty. And then there's all kinds of opportunities to participate in local farmers markets. This last year, thanks to Robbie, my wife and I got hooked up with this guy who raises local beef. We got a quarter of a cow in our freezer that was raised here in Jackson. Matt Hill gathers eggs from this farmer in Concord every week. People pick up eggs at Hill's house. So there's all kinds of ways, once you get to know a place, to participate in its local food economy. In fact, I know students who walk up here to this Hearthstone farmers market scene here in Chapel. Right? You can get out and sort of participate in the local food economy. This has all sorts of benefits. It may seem really small, but I think that you'll find that it changes the way you think about your food and about your place. It also gives more money to the local farmers. It keeps the farmers responsible to their community. But I think one of the most important aspects is that it helps you think more carefully about where you are. Okay, second, we can all participate in a DIY culture, do-it-yourself culture. Doing as much of our own work as we can instead of hiring others to do it for us. Mow your own lawn, shovel snow off your driveway and sidewalk, change your own oil, do your own home repairs, cook for yourself. Doing this kind of work provides great joy. When we cook a good meal from raw ingredients, the satisfaction is immense. I enjoy the process. Usually my wife and I cook together, so we enjoy that time together. We enjoy the food better. If we have people over, it's just a great opportunity to share community, right? It's way less efficient than going to the store and buying prepared meal. So it doesn't, if you're calculating about, well, my pay rate maybe is more efficient, but if you made a lot of money, right, it wouldn't be efficient to take the time to cook your own meal. It'd be cheaper and more efficient to go to McDonald's every day. But that would be such a sad life, right? So you need to start imagining a sort of more healthy, delightful life, and doing your own cooking is one way to do that. And doing the work to sustain your own household also contributes to a more healthy culture. When we outsource our work to specialists, and this is what Robert talked about when he talked about G.K. Chesterton's great quote, if a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. When you start outsourcing all of your economy to specialists, you end up outsourcing often your entertainment also. So when we work alongside our families and neighbors, we're also more likely to share meals, games, conversation, and community. Right? So the whole package goes together. Doing all this work for yourself might be criticized for taking someone's job. This past Thanksgiving, I was reading a blog post about how Black Friday is now approaching on Thanksgiving. You can go Black Friday shopping on Thanksgiving. And so this guy was saying, don't go Black Friday shopping at all. We need to boycott and tell them not to do this. And somebody in the comments of the post, one of the first comments complained that the boycott would not hurt Walmart, these other big businesses, but would just hurt their employees. Right? So you have to shop at Walmart so that their employees can have money to buy toys for their kids for Christmas. And this is the kind of logic, or like when the casino went in down the way recently. I saw a newspaper article that talked about how it's going to be great for local economy because we're going to get 250 new jobs. They don't talk about the effects of the casino on the community, right? All jobs are not the same. Maybe we need to start imagining an economy where fewer people work at Walmart or work at casinos, and more people run responsible, locally accountable businesses. Or maybe we need fewer fast food workers and more people doing the work of growing our food and tending our land. Maybe we need fewer people who spend their whole lives mowing other people's lawns and more people living complex and interdependent lives. So I'm not saying we can magically achieve a just economy overnight, okay? But I do think that we shouldn't simply give up because working well might take away somebody's job. I think that's a good excuse. Finally, my third idea here is to consider participating in the growing sharing economy. Communities are using new information technology to find better ways of sharing resources and working together. This takes all kinds of forms. I have a short list here. You probably have a lot more. For instance, ride sharing via Lyft or Sidecar or a Zipcar. Right? You don't own a car, but you share a car. Or room sharing via Airbnb or couchsurfing. But you can also participate in these sorts of efforts locally. You guys know about SAU Thrift Facebook page or the Great Textbook Swap, right? These are things students have set up to share resources, basically, so that you don't have to buy as much stuff. Even those of you who participate in Super Screen, I think are practicing a form of this, where one floor or one room or apartment shares a TV, so that you don't each have your own TV, right? I carpool to work almost every day. In fact, some of my riders in the back, so maybe be able to carpool after this, and probably doesn't like what I say. But I'm very grateful for that, right? That my wife and I are privileged to only own one car because we have friends who will permit me to ride along. So the other thing we've done recently is start a tool library. So several of us put on a Google document various tools we own so that when I'm working on a project, we can share those tools. So for instance, right now I'm borrowing Jack Baker's long roller handle so I can paint my ceiling. Like, I don't want to go buy a new roller handle. Jack's not using it, so we're sharing it. In this case, even more extreme. I did it last year. I was we needed to put a new roof on our house, or part of our house, or our back porch. And Laura was from prof in our theology department came over and spent a whole Saturday working on a roof with us. Just what a great gift, right? So these sorts of ways of sharing time and resources, I think, allow us to begin participating in more local economies, ones based on affection rather than money. So even if we don't join a monastery right away, we can still work work against, I guess, an economy that would seek to commodify everything by putting a price on it. But no matter how well you work within your local household, of course, there is no way to leave nothing out. Windleberry's dream of doing our work like the snow, quietly, leaving nothing out, isn't a standard to achieve, I think, but an ideal to aspire to. Or perhaps it is a prayer. May our work be like the snow, quietly, leaving nothing out. For as we approach this ideal, I think our work becomes more and more holy. It becomes an act of prayer. Barry explains how we understand the Christian narrative, of which we are a part. As we understand it more and more, we will increasingly realize how our work becomes a form of prayer. This is the way he writes. If we think of ourselves as living souls, immortal creatures, living in the midst of a creation that is mostly mysterious, and if we see that everything we make or do cannot help but have an everlasting significance for ourselves, for others, and for the world, then we see why some religious teachers have understood work as a form of prayer. But not only, I think, should our work be a prayer, our prayer can also be our work. And in fact, the highest work to which we've all been called, and the only work we can do that might leave nothing out, is prayer. Stanley Hauerwas, in reflecting the role of education in preparing Christians to do good work, writes that Christians of all people should find satisfaction and happiness in their work, and that not least among the good work Christians have been given is prayer. We call that work liturgy, which is the work of prayer. Some of you might have heard of the 17th century monk Brother Lawrence, right, practicing the presence of God. I think he's widely regarded as one of the most holy people, right? He's a very saintly man. And yet he spent his whole life doing dishes. He spent his whole life working in the kitchen of the monastery. That was his vocation, right? What a high vocation, doing dishes. And yet while he was doing the work, the sort of necessary work of his community, he was also praying. He was participating in God's work directly. So I think that's perhaps the sort of extreme example of where work is integrated, where we're doing necessary work and we're also leaving nothing out. So let us work well, work locally, and be creative and imaginative as we seek to do diverse work in our communities for a common purpose. But my prayer is that we may also attend to the work of prayer, so that by God's grace our work may be like the snow, leaving nothing out. So that's my ideas, right? I do the prayer because I don't know, it's not sufficient, right? But I'm really interested in what ideas you might have regarding how our work could be more inclusive, more comprehensive. How might we work more as amateurs for love and less as professionals for money? So, any of my ideas, any other sharing economies you guys know, any ideas you might have, any questions? Or it just seems all too daunting? Yeah.
One of the things I really liked doing is that I have several friends who are artists, and I don't want to go buy something that just says like love, peace, pace, and joy, and it's just like in Walmart. It has the same font and the same like that everybody else in America has, or going to IKEA and just putting something
IKEA's
for
nice.
4 hours.
Yeah.
But like I really like the idea of some of my friends who are artists, like they make really pretty stuff
Yeah.
that has never been seen before, and to take part in that.
That's a great idea.
And supporting those, like, and seeking that out, it takes a while longer than going and helping somebody out because, heavens knows we've seen those shows with people just collecting things.
Right.
And they have these treasures that they don't know about for years. You have like 14 different shows on that kind of thing.
But that gives you beautiful artwork for your walls at probably a cheaper price than if you went to Walmart, or at least even more than Walmart, but if you actually got real art. And it helps, like you said, helps out your friend who's an artist.
Right.
That's great. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
somewhat phrase as a comment.
Sure.
When I think about everything you've been speaking about, I get the apprehension that this sort of approach could foster a spirit of arrogance within the practitioner. For instance, I mean, we're doing all the hard things, but when we're doing all the hard things, I think people wonder, you too good to work in fast food? You too good to eat there? You too good to shop at Walmart? I would be concerned about how that would reflect on my Christian, basically being, we're supposed to be lights for Christ, etc. And I work with non-Christians quite a bit. I'm actually on a moderator on a community forum, so I work with a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. And their perception of Christians is that they are arrogant people who think they are better than every one of us. And it really pushes them away. Sure. I've become friends with some of them, but it took a while. They were shocked when they found out I was a Christian because most Christians would associate with them. It's such a delicate balance, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. Like, how do we remain humble and still open, trying to be a light for Christ in a fallen world?
Yeah,
and that being so exclusive with our lifestyle.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that word exclusive. I mean, I think the idea is that we're actually hopefully more inclusive, that our economies are more involved with our neighbors and those around us. So, it depends on where you live, I suppose, but I don't think that has to be exclusive at all. I mean, most people a lot of people I know who live in towns don't know their neighbors because they just go to the store and buy stuff. But, I was very appreciative when last year we got new neighbors, and he helped me shovel my driveway sometimes. It's a great opportunity for conversation. He's very generous with his time, and we've been able to collaborate. So I think actually that of course this could become private, right? But I think that's a separate issue. Anything we do can become private. So we always have to be humble. But I think actually that if we participate in local economies more, we'll find more opportunities for genuine interaction with people who may be very different from us, but have to live in the same neighborhood. So I think the concern is certainly important that we should always be humble, but I'm not sure that the local economy really is that. Other thoughts or comments or ideas? Yeah.
Well, this one to note that in the economy today, a lot of the greatest commodity is information.
Yeah.
And I think that we can also exchange information in a way that's communal as well. Instead of going to YouTube to find out how to tie a tie, ask a guy down the hall. It's definitely more humbling.
Yeah.
He has to sit through you fumbling through there.
Yeah.
And you're taking up his time. But it's definitely a different kind of time.
It is, yeah.
I remember time looking at some stranger time.
That's so funny that you chose that example because for me, the first experience where I used YouTube as a source of information, but I had to learn how to tie a tie. My dad tried to help me, but it's hard to teach me how to tie a tie because it's backwards, and he was really busy and in a hurry. My dad's a very patient man, but for some reason he was in a hurry. So he tried once and failed. I said, I'll do it later. It's like, whatever. So I went to YouTube and looked up and did it. And then when he saw it, he was like, I think my mom actually was really shocked, like, you learned how to tie a tie on YouTube. It's like a rite of passage for his manhood. So my mom was not sure. So, but you're right, I should have just waited and been patient and let my dad help me more. So yeah, I think that's a really good idea. That's great. Any other ideas? I mean, I think a lot of it is just being creative, right? Looking for opportunities, because we're trained increasingly to go to YouTube or to go to these sort of sources of specialized information or products rather than trying to be resourceful. I'm working on that. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, so is there, in your opinion, a quintessential good work area in today's economy where, like, if you work there, you're probably doing something meaningful?
No. I don't think so. I don't know. My thought is there are a lot of things you could do well, a lot of areas you could go into and find ways to do it well. So there's many opportunities, but pretty much all of them I think could be twisted. I mean, you can be a bad pastor, right? can be a bad teacher, you can be a bad doctor, so it's always hard. Yeah.
I would like to hear your thoughts on the idea of proximity with other Christians, because obviously in monastic life, and we were just mentioning it earlier, the exclusivity,
Yeah.
that eventually people would travel and be surrounding the monasteries, and that's how a lot of times spreading would happen. But at the same time, I don't want to seclude ourselves now that there's obviously nowhere to go. But how much of it can we, once we're out of college and not in dorm rooms next to a plethora of Christians, how can we, have that community without just seeing each other once every Sunday or that kind of thing, and promote that kind of community that would be monastic?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I didn't bring this up, but there's a lot of interesting new monastic movements going on. You know about this? There's all kinds of, yeah, okay. If you look up new monasticism, there's all kinds of books and articles being written right now about that, where it's not people taking vows and it's often Protestants, but they're trying to find ways to live in intentional community. So, some of the more extreme ones will actually get like an apartment complex and live together. But then maybe, people from the same church just try to move to the same neighborhood. And so they're closer together. And I think some people think, oh, they're withdrawing from society, like the Amish move away. But I think what more often happens is they're able to foster these sorts of vibrant, healthy communities that are a blessing to their neighborhood and their community. And it actually provides more opportunities for outreach. So I don't think we should see this as a sort of withdrawal from society, so much as it is an intentional cultivation of healthy community that would be a blessing to society. I mean, think about it. Israel is called out to be a blessing, right? They are the chosen people separated in order to bless all nations. So I think it's that same sort of dynamic. Yeah.
I just think in response to the, kind of the exclusivity,
Yeah.
and then just like using Nathan's comment about tie and tie, I think actually the thing you're talking about is much more difficult. It means that I have to step out of my comfort
Yeah.
zone. The reason I don't do that is, one, because I don't have enough time. I seriously
Yeah.
don't, because my life's more important than taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
And two, because interacting with other people is a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Messy.
It is. It's really messy, and I think what happens is in these new monastic communities, you end up having to be with non-Christians all the
Yeah.
time. Like the first comment is
Yeah. And even the monks, when I was I spent about a week at a Trappist abbey, which is type of Benedictine monastery, and I was talking with one of the young brothers, and I asked him what it was like to be in the monastery. And he said, I hate some of these brothers. They're great people, they're Christians, right? They're holy people, but you live with them in this kind of close proximity for a while, and you get on each other's nerves. So you guys know it's dorm life too, right? It is hard to live in this sort of community. So yeah, it's not easy. Yeah.
Right? Not that I'm old, but. but the longer get over with that. But the longer I live, the more I see. Like the time part is. It seems to be more and more how we overburden ourselves with all these little things. Right? And in terms of like the better than thou, right? If you schedule yourself less and actually learn how to do different things, then when you find somebody else with a need, you have the time to help them meet them.
Yeah.
Right? Then that breaks down you're too good for me to do shop at Walmart. But then when you meet somebody that does, that actually needs help, like, oh, my car is busted. And you're like, oh, I have some money. Let me come take a look at it. And then they're not going to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't take it into an auto mechanic, because they'll be really grateful that you came to help them.
I know. That's a good point. I think oftentimes self-sufficiency, at least at some level, is a prerequisite for community. Right? You have to have something to offer your guests, something to offer. So learning those skills is a way to bless them. Yeah.
When you talk about work and good works, you described occupations and jobs that were good work for the Lord. And this is before you had broken down in the monastery.
Yeah.
And then you talked about works that were either not useful or destructive. And I think that, you know, from our Christian view, there are some blatantly obvious ones that are destructive,
Right.
you know, like con man or, you know, stripper or something
Right.
like that. Obviously destructive, but for some of us, we're not gonna, we might not finish our degree, we may have to work in a field that's boring or,
Right.
but something that we need to practice reformation out of. But I'm wondering where you draw the line on what works are destructive and non-useful. What comes to mind in that field? Because there are some ones that are in between, you know what I mean?
There's a lot that is, I think most of it is in between. All right, I mean, I think, Nathan, you were asking like, are there some that are just outside of it in one way, and I'm not sure. There's definitely some that are destructive, right? But I think most of our work is sort of in that middle space, where we do it well for the Word of God, or we could do it destructively. So, I think that's a sort of an exercise of discernment, that you have to be discerning, to be thoughtful about it, both about the field you go into and the job you get in there, or if you can't get in that field, but then also about how you do that work. And, you know, my dad works for IBM, sells software, and he often wrestles, like, you know, that seems like a good white-collar job, good job, but he often wrestles, am I doing something that's good or it's not good? Am I just helping people build websites? Is that useful? So, it's tough. I don't think there's a sort of easy answer, but that's really hard. And I think it's, you know, that's kind of the impetus that drove my thinking, because if we can't do fulfilling work for money, maybe we can find ways to do more of our work for love rather than money, right? So that even if you work a 9-to-5 job and to feel that, and the rest of your life. Yeah.
What do you say about like the majority of common everyday jobs, like jobs in retail, they're not like that in themselves, but the vast majority of them are tied to like exploitative work overseas. So, like, what would you say about that?
I think that's just, you know, kind of the same thing where I'm not going to judge somebody who either can't make a living or has to take a job that they probably don't really want to do, right? I think that's sort of a fact of living in our economy right now. So I don't think we should celebrate that, but I also don't think we should blame the victim or blame people who do this work. Those are I think oftentimes the best work we can do. But that doesn't mean we should say that's the ideal. That's what I'm trying to say. How can we imagine at least small changes we can make? All right, anything else? Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you.